What's going on, guys? It's Fight Season MMA, and today I want to make a video talking about the plan for Alex Pereira after his UFC 303 win versus Jiri Prochazka and his UFC 300 win against Jamal Hill. As we all know, the fight scheduled between Alexander Rakic and Magomed Ankalaev was a surprise to all people in the UFC community because we all believed that Alex Pereira would be facing Magomed Ankalaev in his next title defense, but that leaves the question of what the UFC is going to do with Alex Pereira for his next fight. So let's jump right into the video on why I believe what the UFC is going to do in their next fight. But before we do that, please guys, please go leave a like, comment, and subscribe. That is the best way to go support the channel, and please help us on the road to 1,000 subscribers. We are well on our way, and I know that 97.2% of my viewers who watch the videos are not subscribed, so please go down there and hit that subscribe button. That would mean an absolute ton for you guys to go down there and show support to the channel. And while you're down there, turn on the post notifications just so you guys are always notified when the UFC content releases daily. But let's jump right into the video of what I believe the UFC is going to do with Alex Pereira. Okay, so as we all know, Alex Pereira took a fight on 2 weeks' notice to save the UFC 303 card, which was originally going to be headlined by Michael Chandler versus Conor McGregor, but Conor McGregor ended up breaking his pinky toe prior to that fight happening, so they needed a backup replacement for that card. And in came Alex Pereira to get the second round knockout about 5 seconds into the second round knockout with a switch head kick to Jiri's right side. But that begs the question, what is Alex Pereira going to do next? Because he said he wanted to take a short break. And a short break for Alex Pereira was about 5 months. So he wanted to come back in November or December. But I think the UFC is going to hold him out a little bit longer, probably to about January or February of next year, just because he's getting a little older, and I think the UFC is going to want to wait for something special. So what are the options for Alex Pereira coming up next? And I think that there are two massive options for Pereira. The first one rides on the fight that would possibly happen on November 9th at Madison Square Garden, and that card is going to be headlined by Jon Jones versus Stipe Miocic, and all we're waiting for at this point is an official announcement for that fight to occur. There's been rumors that the fight has been signed, but I can't make a video on an official announcement unless it has officially been signed. But as we all know, we're all speculating. We all know that that's going to be the fight, and we just want to make 100% sure that Jon Jones versus Stipe Miocic is going to headline Madison Square Garden in November. But the reason I'm looking at that fight is if Jon Jones retires there, which he's really been hinting at, and if you want me to link my other video where I talked about Jon Jones retiring and him putting out the tweet saying that he will retire or hinting at it, I will leave that right here. But Jon Jones has said that he wants to retire after the Stipe Miocic fight, leaving Tom Aspinall with no worthy heavyweight opponent, and that would leave the perfect time for an absolute banger of a super fight in that heavyweight division. You have Tom Aspinall versus Alex Pereira for the undisputed heavyweight title. You give Tom Aspinall his absolute killer moment to possibly derail the hype train that is Alex Pereira, and you give Alex Pereira a shot at becoming the first ever 3-division champion in the UFC organization. Now, why do I think that this fight is possibly going to happen? Because first off, I do think that Jon Jones is going to retire, and if Jon Jones doesn't retire, we all know that that fight with Tom Aspinall is going to be imminent pretty quickly around here. But I do think that Jon Jones is going to pull the plug on his absolutely stupendous UFC career, which I do not blame him for. Tom Aspinall is an absolute god in there. He is doing some crazy things in there, and truly, Jon Jones, I think, will lose that fight against Aspinall, not because Jon Jones isn't a good fighter, but main difference is the age gap. And I do think that Jon Jones retiring and Stipe Miocic retiring, two absolute UFC legends and bosses inside the octagon, leaves for the new pathway of the next generation, which I think would be a fight between Tom Aspinall and Alex Pereira for that UFC heavyweight strap. And I think that would be an absolute incredible fight to be had between these absolute behemoths inside the octagon. We all know Alex Pereira, who used to cut down to middleweight, would walk around 230 pounds, and the only other middleweight that walks near there is Paulo Costa, and he is absolutely gigantic and bulky too. But Tom Aspinall, we all know, weighed in around 251 pounds at his last fight, which is an absolute giant human being for the heavyweight division, considering how fast and how dynamic he is. And truly, I think that this fight between Alex Pereira and Tom Aspinall could possibly happen. But what if Jon Jones wins, and what if he doesn't, or what if he comes back, and what he fights Tom Aspinall? Then what are you going to do with Alex Pereira? Well, there's another fight that's happening this weekend, actually, that really has some big implications on Alex Pereira, and that is Dricus du Plessis versus Israel Adesanya. And I truly think that if Israel Adesanya gets a stunning knockout win in incredible fashion, we could possibly have a very good middleweight rankings and bracket right there. And I think that would set up a much needed middleweight interim title between Sean Strickland and the winner of Robert Whittaker versus Khamzat Chimaev for the interim middleweight title, and allow Israel Adesanya to go up and challenge for the light heavyweight title against his old foe, Alex Pereira, in a third fight rematch. And that is an absolute massive fight. In the first fight between the two in the UFC, Alex Pereira got the best of Israel Adesanya in a comeback knockout win, or TKO win, in the 5th round at Madison Square Garden at UFC 281. And in the second fight at UFC 287 in Miami, Florida, Israel Adesanya had the absolute stunning knockout in the second round after he made Alex Pereira overextend and hit him with an over right hand, which knocked Pereira out cold. But logically, the UFC still has juice upon this Pereira and Adesanya rivalry, and I think that there is still a community and a fan push out there to see this fight for the third time. But this all relies on Israel Adesanya's ability to go out there and beat someone like Dricus du Plessis. And I do think that is a real possibility of happening. I think Israel Adesanya's counter-striking ability, I think that his goal of being able to go out there and absolutely sweep Dricus du Plessis to regain that middleweight title. And we all know that Contender Izzy is a different monster out there inside the UFC octagon. But I do think that would set him up with a fight in the light heavyweight division with someone like Alex Pereira, which would be an absolute banger of a fight to be had, considering that we've seen these two fight twice at middleweight at UFC 281 and UFC 287, where we're 1-1 inside the UFC. Now, Alex Pereira is 2-0 against Israel Adesanya outside the UFC, but we don't want to count those. We want a best of 3 between these two individuals inside the UFC octagon. And truly, this would be an absolute amazing fight to be had, because I think that this would really benefit Alex Pereira, considering that he won't have to cut that much weight back down to middleweight, and his chin would be aided so much in the UFC light heavyweight division against someone like Israel Adesanya, who is a little bit of a smaller middleweight. I shouldn't say he's a smaller middleweight. He just doesn't cut that much weight compared to someone like a Paulo Costa, possibly a Sean Strickland, or an Alex Pereira when he did fight in that middleweight division. But I do think that those are the two options. And last option, I believe, would be the winner of Alexander Rakic and Magomed Ankalaev, where I do think that Magomed Ankalaev is going to get a decision win between those two at UFC 308 at Abu Dhabi, and I think that you would flip Magomed pretty quickly. Worst comes to worst, if Dricus du Plessis beats Israel Adesanya at UFC 305, which is a true possibility, and John Jones wants that competitive advantage over Tom Aspinall and wants to get that fight pretty soon, unless if you book that prior. But I do think that John Jones would get the priority over Tom Aspinall than someone like Alex Pereira. So I think what happens is if Israel Adesanya beats Dricus du Plessis at UFC 305 this weekend, I think that you would have Alex Pereira versus Israel Adesanya 3 to headline a pay-per-view, and possibly on that same card, a fight for the interim middleweight title between Robert Whittaker, the winner of Robert Whittaker and Khamzat Chimaev versus Sean Strickland for that fight. And if Israel Adesanya loses and John Jones retires after his fight with Stipe Miocic and Stipe retires, you do Tom Aspinall versus Alex Pereira to headline a pay-per-view. As for the undisputed heavyweight title, which would be an absolute banger of a fight in worst case scenario, say John Jones retires, or say John Jones fights Tom Aspinall, that's a massive pay-per-view. Dricus du Plessis beats Israel Adesanya. You have Alex Pereira versus Magomed Ankalaev or Alexander Rakic, which I do think is going to be Magomed Ankalaev, headlining a pay-per-view sometime early next year. We all know that fight is going down. I think it's October 26th at UFC 308. And that would be an absolute amazing fight for Alex Pereira to be able to test his wrestling ability inside the UFC against some really good Dagestani wrestler in Magomed Ankalaev. Thank you guys so much for watching this episode of Fight Season MMA, and please let me know what you think about these possible fight matchups for Alex Pereira. I think the UFC wants to make Alex Pereira versus Israel Adesanya 3 most out of any single matchup in the UFC currently, and I do think that would be the biggest money grab in the organization. And two, I think that would lend itself to a good middleweight interim title bout between Sean Strickland and the winner of Robert Whittaker versus Khamzat Chimaev. And then if that doesn't happen, I think the UFC wants to make Tom Aspinall versus Alex Pereira, where Alex Pereira goes up to challenge for his third belt inside the UFC. And like I said, worst case scenario, you always have the light heavyweights going up. Magomed Ankalaev, Alexander Rakic, someone like that inside the UFC. Now, you could push someone like Khalil Roundtree up, but I don't think that he would be completely ready for that fight. But I do think that the winner of Magomed and Alexander Rakic should get that title shot, worst case scenario. But thank you guys so much for watching this episode of Fight Season MMA, and please go leave a like, comment, and subscribe. That is the best way to support the channel, and please help us on the road to 1,000 subscribers. We're doing so good. We're currently at 730 plus, and I would be amazing to reach 1,000 very, very soon. So please go down there and smash the subscribe button. It's free, and I know 97.2% of my viewers are not subscribed, so please go down there and hit that subscribe button. It helps absolutely so much. But thank you guys so much for watching this episode of Fight Season MMA, and I will catch you guys very, very soon with more UFC content and news.